Hello there, this is Benny.
And this is Kyle.
And you're listening to a very special episode of The Doctor's Watcher.
Indeed. This is the Holiday Celebrations podcast about every episode of Doctor Who.
Well, we have our own holiday happening right now. I don't know if that was the holiday that you were referencing, but I'll let you say it, Kyle. You tell the listeners what I'm talking about.
It's true. Today, listeners, is in fact the 100th episode mess.
Yes. The most important holiday, really.
Indeed.
This is the 100th episode of The Doctor's Watcher. Not the 100th episode of Doctor Who that we've done.
It's true. We have done a few bonus episodes.
Yeah, so it is the 100th episode of just the podcast.
Right. I guess that makes it the 97th episode of Doctor Who.
Worth celebrating.
I asked Google how many episodes of Doctor Who there are, and it said 862, which
Jeez.
I believe includes the movie and various specials. So that means that after this episode, we will have completed 11.25% of Doctor Who.
Huh. That's more than I thought.
Yeah, we're more than 10% of the way there.
I mean, the fact that we've been doing this for years and we're only 10% of the way there. But I mean, the fact that we're still on the first Doctor, I think, and that there are 13 Doctors. I guess it depends on how you count it. But
I think the first 4 Doctors, I believe, are the most prolific.
Yeah, I know the first 2 especially are like miles ahead of some of the others. I know there are some that's like, there's one that's one movie and a couple that are just a few. Like I know Christopher Eccleston only had like one short season. So.
Yeah, 10 or 12 or something like that. So yeah, at some point we're going to be flying through them.
If we ever make it that far, we'll see. But yeah, looking back on 100 episodes of this dang show, Kyle, what comes to mind when you think about our journey so far?
One thing I was thinking about just the other day, or maybe earlier today, was about how when we first started, we were recording in person generally.
Yeah.
And that didn't last too long just due to timing and world events.
Yes, world events especially.
But then in the time that we have been doing the podcast, we both bought houses and moved.
Yeah, this wasn't intentionally our pandemic baby because we did start before all that happened. But I think that possibly one of the reasons that it lasted as long as it did was because we had time. Didn't have a whole lot else going on during the pandemic, and it also was a good opportunity for us to see each other on a regular basis and hang out.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if it meant talking about Doctor Who.
And I don't know, it's been, a few years, I guess. We started in 2019. So it's been a few years, but I think that kind of because of the pandemic, it doesn't really feel like it has been as long as it actually has. Just because
when
time has been weird.
When you said that we were coming up on the 100th episode, I did have a moment where I kind of had to step back and be like, oh boy, we've been doing this a while. That's a lot of time and effort that we've put into this podcast. But I have been grateful for the opportunity to see you on a regular basis, because I'm not very good at scheduling things, and it's hard, especially
I'm not either.
Trying to do things in person. Y'all are kind of further away now than when we began, so it's a little harder to, not impossible, but a little harder to see you in person. So seeing you over Discord and doing a Doctor Watcher is especially, with all the pandemic stuff, has been really good.
Yeah, for sure. We did get to see each other in person just last night, though, and that was a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah, I hope you're not sick of me yet. Kyle and I went to a board game night that some of our friends hosted, and that was a lot of fun. For the board game heads out there, we played Machi Koro and Wingspan. I had never played Wingspan before, but I'd heard a lot of good things, so that was really interesting.
Yeah, it was my first time playing Wingspan as well. It was not my first time playing Machi Koro, but I think it might have been my first time winning Machi Koro.
Very important fact. Yeah, I think I've played Machi Koro with you actually before last night.
Yeah, I think we have played it together.
One of the other significant things about last night is oh boy, we stayed out kind of late, and it was past midnight by the time I made it to bed, which never happens. I am a sleepy boy, and Kyle can attest that my ability to form coherent sentences takes a nosedive around 7:30 p.m. And just gets worse from there. So, and I think listeners of our podcast know that my ability to sort of string words together and think of the right expression is already not the best. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll see how this goes. I should tell our listeners, if I'm going to mention that I won Machi Koro, I should also say that I came in last in Wingspan.
Well, I was next to last, so I was in good company. But yeah, to bring it back to Doctor Who and the Doctor's Watcher, I wanted to kind of take this opportunity to pause and reflect a bit on our journey and talk about some of my favorite things about the podcast and my favorite things that we've done. Looking back, I did quite enjoy the holiday specials and the April Fool's special that we did, even though they are kind of cringe. Whatever, it's fine. We're cringe, but we're free.
Yeah, and they were a lot of fun to do.
I always enjoy the ship names that we come up with people. I was thinking, well, what's my favorite bit? That might be one of my favorite bits, and the fact that I know that it annoys at least one of our listeners, and if you're listening, you know who you are. The fact that I know that's annoying to at least one of you. Somehow, I don't know, maybe this says a lot about me as a person, but that makes it almost more hilarious to me. Sorry.
And they continue to listen anyway.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
We do appreciate that.
all listeners, but then, the one listener I'm speaking to in particular. What are your favorite bits, Kyle?
Oh, favorite bits. That's a tough question because all of our bits are so good.
There you go. That's the best answer.
The bit that I am most often trying to remind myself about when I'm writing my notes and wishing that I remembered more and put more jokes in is basically the bit about how the whole show is just a D&D game or a insert RPG here game.
You feel like we don't make enough references to that because I feel like that's our whole show. That's all we make references to. If you don't write it into the episode, I feel like I've got your back there. I'm going to make the reference.
Yeah, I think that's probably the bit that I come back to the most.
Yeah. The one that I always kind of forget to make references to, but I quite enjoy is Coco. The various characters drinking cocoa and making cocoa for each other. Harkening back to the Aztecs, it's one of my favorite recurring bits.
Yeah. Also harkening back to Aztecs, I'm glad that Docatecture continues to be an ongoing ship.
Yeah. I still haven't watched a whole lot of the modern Doctor Who, but if we ever do, you watch them, right, Kyle? Can you confirm whether Docatecture is still going strong?
As far as I can tell, yeah, I think it is.
Oh, good. Good. Well, I'm sure it remains in the Doctor's heart, even if it's not as much like, a primary ship on the show. I'm sure it's still in the subtext.
Indeed.
Oh, cool.
Well, shall we get to it?
Yeah, we you can't just rest on our laurels. We must move ever forward. Let's talk about season 3, episode, what is this, 16?
16.
Season 3, episode 16.
The Feast of Stephen.
Yeah.
Which is the 7th episode of the Daleks Master Plan serial.
Indeed. Which reminds me, what were the coronas of the sun? Did we ever establish that?
You know, I don't think we did. I think that might have been one of the episode titles that doesn't come into play.
Cool name. All right, fair enough. Well, we'll see whether or not Stephen gets a feast in this episode.
So this episode was actually written by Terry Nation. I know we had Dennis Spooner last time, but we're back to Terry again.
I can't keep track of who's doing what and how many episodes and what you said originally in terms of the ratio of which episodes different people did. So I am starting to suspect it's going to be a long serial.
Yeah. I believe the serial is half and half in terms of authorship.
Yeah, given how many Terry Nations we've had and how few Dennis Spooners, again, that's part of the reason I think it's going to be a long one. And the fact that it's a Terry Nation one, those tend to be long. So
I watched the loose canon introduction to this serial. I think I mentioned on an earlier episode that there's like an intro and interview and stuff.
So Kyle, again, is this you telling us how you watched it?
It is indeed. It's another reconstructed episode. And yeah, I thought I would go ahead and watch the intro to the whole serial that Loose Cannon put together. It was pretty interesting. It's mostly just kind of like a brief history of the serial itself in terms of production and writership and stuff. It did have spoilers in it for sure, so I would not recommend watching it until we're done with the serial, which is a little bit odd since it's the introduction to the serial. But
well, I mean, it's also a show that's like, I don't know, what is this, 50, 60 years old? Like,
yeah,
I feel like at some point, although who knows, maybe once enough time has passed, spoilers become spoilers again because clearly nobody's seen it.
But one thing that I learned from it was that this serial was actually originally conceived of as being half as long as it actually is.
I believe it.
But apparently the mother-in-law of a BBC executive thought that Doctor Who should have more Daleks in it, and so they basically like doubled the length of the serial. And then I guess like Terry Nation wrote half of it and then like wrote outlines for the rest, and Dennis Spooner like did the actual script based on Terry Nation's outlines.
Yeah, I think last time when we had Dennis Spooner, then you said based on an idea by or based on an outline by or something.
Yeah, I don't remember what the official on-screen title was, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah, cool. Well, cool.
Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention before we get to Cliff Dingler, which may become relevant over the course of this episode, is that the original air date for this episode was the 25th of December in 1965.
You did say holiday episode. Well, that's fun. Cool. So you mentioned a Cliff Dangler, Kyle?
Indeed. Do you recall what that was?
I do sort of recall. So we are back in the TARDIS now, and our heroes have the Terrasite, I think it's called.
Terranium.
Oh man, I'm forgetting it. Anyway, we have the Terranium, and we're trying to get away from the Daleks, and we're on a planet, and we're just about to leave the TARDIS when the Doctor stopped Stephen and Sarah and warned them that the atmosphere, I believe, is poisonous. It's somehow dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it was just poisonous. The old classic.
So we review that scene where that all happens, and the doctor warns them of the poisonous atmosphere. And then we cut to the outside, and it's basically like a town in England.
Oh, interesting.
The poisonous atmosphere is just air pollution.
Oh, huh. I guess that's one way to resolve that Cliff Dangler.
Uh-huh.
A little disappointing, not gonna lie.
So 2 police constables are arriving back at their station. They're singing Christmas carols in their car, and a 3rd police officer who's already back at the station is wondering, like, what's up with this new police box that's outside.
So is this like contemporary England then?
Yeah, I think it's meant to be
1960s.
It's probably meant to be like the day this episode aired.
What? You can look outside, folks, and see the doctor.
Uh-huh. So he basically assigns the other 2 constables to stick around and just like keep an eye on this police box. Meanwhile, inside the TARDIS, Stephen is upset that the doctor is going to go outside to fix the scanner, but Stephen doesn't get to. And the doctor explains that in both Stephen's and Sarah Kingdom's times, the atmosphere is pure, but here...
That is the worst kind of pollution I've met in years.
Stephen and Sarah are both from the future, and it's good to know people get pollution under control.
Uh-huh. The doctor's going to be fine because he's used to all sorts of atmospheres, apparently. So he tells them that they should only come outside if something happens to him. And he tells...
doctor, way to ensure that something's going to happen to you.
Uh-huh. He tells Stephen to close the TARDIS door after him, and he heads out. So we cut to the outside, where the doctor pops out of the TARDIS. He exchanges greetings with the constable who's right there, like, watching over the TARDIS, and then he just turns around and heads back into the TARDIS. The constable calls the other constable over and tells him that the door opened and that there's a man with long white hair inside.
And the other one says, Father Christmas?
They do actually make that joke later.
Oh, dang it. I jumped the gun.
They try the door, but it's locked. Inside the TARDIS, the doctor is telling Sarah and Stephen about what's going on outside. His plan is to head back out, and he's going to distract the cops. And Stephen should, like, wait a few minutes and then just go fix the scanner.
Okay. I love that the scanner is just something on the outside of the TARDIS. Uh-huh. And even though the TARDIS looks like a police box, I'm picturing that, you just slide aside a panel and there's some sort of gadget in there. Well, we'll see what it actually ends up being.
It's probably
if we see it.
when Geordi, like, pops open the top of Data's head.
Yes, exactly.
There's just like a bunch of wires and buttons and lights and stuff. Yeah. So Steven's like, I thought you said this air was, like, super polluted and shit. And the doctor's like, yeah, whatever. Just go fix the scanner in a few minutes.
Hold your breath, my boy.
Outside the TARDIS, the doctor gets stopped, like, basically immediately by the 2 constables.
It wouldn't be Father Christmas, would it? All right, lad, it's a fair cop.
Ah, there it is.
He gets taken into the station where there's a guy complaining to the cops about the rebels moving his greenhouse. Mm. The actor who's playing this guy apparently previously played the clothing seller in The Crusade.
Oh, interesting. Do you think it's a callback?
Well, the doctor actually notices this.
Haven't I seen your face before somewhere? Where? Yes, of course, I remember now. Yes, the marketplace at Jaffa.
So all these people who happen to look like other characters that the Doctor has run into, it's now canonical that resemblance is something that exists in universe and can be remarked upon.
And they just like haven't noticed that Sarah Kingdom looks like Princess Joanna, but
or that Stephen looks like Alabama Man.
So Stephen waits, for a few minutes, like the Doctor said, and then he rolls a stealth check, and he's able to slip out of the TARDIS, and he hides behind a nearby police car without the constable who's still guarding the TARDIS noticing.
I'm not sure the constable's police car would be the first thing I would go hide behind if I'm trying to hide from the constable. But maybe the closer you are to danger, the further you are from harm, as they say in The Lord of the Rings. Who's that, Merry or Pippin? I think one of them.
The closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm.
Maybe the map is set up so, like, there's a few different places you can hide that you have to, like, sneak from one to the next and stuff. So, yeah, you should probably only hide behind the police car for, like, a moment before you move on to the next hiding spot. So the Doctor is getting questioned. He's, like, inside the station. He learns that this is Christmas Day. He tells the cops that he's
a citizen of the universe and a gentleman to boot.
I enjoy that. we'll see what the cops make of that.
Stephen does, like, wait until the nearby constable, resumes his guard path and walks on to his next post. And once the constable's gone, Stephen notices that there's a spare police uniform in the back seat of the police car that he's hiding behind.
Sure, all police officers keep spare uniforms in their back seats. It's in case they spill a little soup on themselves while they're eating.
So, yeah, he just, like, opens the door. Apparently it wasn't locked or anything. Back at the station, the clothing seller's descendant is still complaining to the sergeant about his missing greenhouse when Stephen wanders in his new costume, and the sergeant takes him to be
The new bloke from J Division come to help us out.
That's handy. I feel like that's the game master, like, throwing the players a bone. Like, they would normally notice if they've never seen you around before, but hey, it's your lucky day. They happen to have a new person who's supposed to show up.
The GM is like, it was really hard to get this game scheduled. I really appreciate you all, like, taking some time on Christmas Day to play with me. So we're just going to make it, like, a pretty fun and chill game.
And the player's like, well, you put the police uniform in the backseat of the car. What was I supposed to do?
So, Stephen, of course, rolls with it. And he also says that he's here about the old man that was brought in a few minutes ago. But the sergeant makes him wait until the Doctor's done being questioned. The Doctor is telling the inspector that the object outside isn't a police box.
It is a machine for investigating time and relative dimensions in space.
I love how there's absolutely no prime directive. The Doctor can just, like, tell anyone he wants. It's fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. The cops, like, I guess I would say that they think that the Doctor is not quite in touch with reality. Is the nice way of putting it. Sarah Kingdom heads out of the TARDIS to check on the Doctor and Stephen, but of course she finds a constable guarding the TARDIS instead. I guess he didn't see her come out because he notices her and thinks that she, like, just arrived here and is now loitering. He tries to get her to move along, but she says that she can't. She needs to fix the scanner eye.
I like how it's a scanner eye. That's sort of a, I don't know, some kind of nostalgic, classic vibe to it.
Yeah. he basically just like keeps trying to get her to leave, basically.
You see, we don't like people hanging around. But at Christmas time, we have to be lenient, and we don't want to make it too difficult for you.
So, do I have to leave? It kind of sounds like you're saying I don't actually have to leave.
She eventually agrees to leave, and the constable tells her to
have a swinging time.
And
okay,
she walks away, thinking about what must have happened to the other two.
The idiots. They've obviously got themselves into some kind of trouble.
You're a companion now, Sarah. Welcome to the party.
Of course, the two idiots get reunited in the station after the doctor's done questioning, or getting questioned, and Stephen claims to the cops that G Division is familiar with this old man. They know how to handle him. And, you know, he rolls a bluff check. It goes well. He takes the doctor outside, where the two of them head for the TARDIS, just in time to spot a constable hassling Sarah.
I don't know what it is about that police box, but first of all, the old bloke comes out of it. Now I catch this lass climbing about on it.
I enjoy lass.
Yeah.
It's a term that people can just use, like, as part of conversation.
Yeah. There's a brief struggle, but the three party members do all manage to get into the TARDIS, which dematerializes as the constable's watch.
Hello, what's up with you? Here it is, gone.
I love it.
Hey folks, isn't this a good podcast? If you like what you hear, let us know. You can do that on social media or by email, or by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Another thing you can do if you like this show is let your friends know. Word of mouth is the best way for us to get new listeners. And now, back to the show. There's a brief scene in the TARDIS control room where they remind us that they have the Terranium and the Daleks have time machine technology and could follow them, but the Daleks probably don't know yet that the Daleks have fake Terranium and our party members kept the real stuff.
I guess that paper mache duplicate was very convincing.
The Doctor wants to try to destroy the real Terranium before the Daleks catch up with them, but this is about as far as they get in their planning before the TARDIS lands. They, check the scanners and readouts and whatnot, and it seems like they're still on Earth, although apparently the atmosphere is much better.
It just occurred to me that it's interesting that they think that the Daleks haven't noticed yet, given that, they traveled through time and the Daleks are in the future, I guess. And how does... You know what? I think we're not supposed to think about it.
Yeah, but somehow, we're all still on the same relative timeline.
Well, it is the time and relative dimensions in space.
That's true.
The TARDIS.
That's true. So Sarah did manage to fix the scanner earlier when she was climbing about all over the police box.
Oh, we didn't get to see it? I mean, we definitely didn't get to see it because it's a loose cannon reconstruction. But
yeah, that's true. On the scanner screen, they see images of a barn or sawmill, basically.
And like a stable, perhaps?
There don't seem to be animals in it.
Okay.
They do hear a scream after a few moments, so they rush out of the TARDIS to see what's going on. And what's going on is that there's a woman being dragged toward a large circular saw.
Oh, dang.
So Stephen attacks the guy, Sarah frees the woman, And it ends up turning out that this is a film set in like early Hollywood.
I'll be honest, when you said it, there's a woman screaming, and then we have this like barn-like building. I was like, well, what if it's a woman giving birth because it's Christmas Eve? And like, nope, not quite. All right, here we go.
Nope. So it is a little bit hard to tell what happens next in the reconstruction, and honestly, the audio is not much help at this point either. But what I think happens is that the director of the movie that's being filmed decides that he really liked Steven and Sarah's performance, and he wants to like sign them to the studio or whatever.
Amazing.
So like,
it's like you really thought she was in danger. That's method.
They're basically like trying to run away. He sends his people after them. And then we get like an old fashioned 1930s movie style title card saying, "And so the hunt was on."
Yeah, I mean, I think we're even more lighthearted than usual, given that it's the holiday special.
Stephen and the doctor have apparently gotten separated from Sarah as they're running about. They pass Charlie Chaplin in the hallway, and then they head through a door.
Oh, cool. Charlie Chaplin.
So we get a brief title card saying, "Meanwhile in the Sheik's tent," and then we cut to another nearby set, which is a bedroom scene being filmed with some Middle Eastern looking characters in, a Sheik's tent sort of setting.
Sure. I mean, I guess we're in the 30s, so it's even more or less, whatever than the 60s, which was still, anyway, we're in the 30s. All right. Sheik's tent. Here we go.
And the director of this scene gets super annoyed when the director of the previous scene bursts into the set looking for Stephen and Sarah. He eventually leaves, but meanwhile Sarah is actually now wandering around on this set, and the director sees her and he tells his assistants to send her to wardrobe, but she basically just hides in a chest instead.
Okay.
We get a "Meanwhile in the Wardrobe Department" title card, and it turns out that the wardrobe department is the door that Stephen and the doctor went through.
Classic.
The two of them get separated when the doctor heads out to look for Sarah. He tells Stephen to wait here, basically. Stephen is still in the police uniform, and he ends up getting mistaken for an actor in a Keystone Cops movie that's being filmed.
I feel like we're one step up from a Keystone Cops movie ourselves here.
We'll get ready to take a step down.
Oh, good.
Because a couple of the other cops in the movie start chasing him, and we get what might be my favorite loose cannon moment that I've seen, which is there's just a static view of the hallway, and then at the end of the hallway there's the cartoon moment of Stephen running across the hall chased by two cops, and it's in Terry Gilliam style animation.
What?
And of just cutouts, static cutouts of the characters kind of
oh, that is delightful,
bouncing across the hallway. And then they're off camera while we hear Stephen yelling about "put me down, put me down." And then they run back in the other direction, and the two cops are carrying Stephen. And
well done,
then they're
cannon.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. They're off camera on the other side of the hallway, and apparently they film a car chase and a car crash, which we just hear the sounds of. And then Stephen apparently escapes and runs away from them.
That's fun.
There's another "Meanwhile back in the Sheik's tent" title card, and the woman actor in this scene thinks that the guy who plays the Sheik is terrible, and she's right. He's like, I will assume that it's like, a regular decent actor acting poorly.
That's always
rather
fun.
than, yeah. The doctor wanders onto the set. He gets mistaken basically immediately for the expert on Arabian customs that the director of this movie has been waiting for.
Well, that's encouraging that they bothered to hire one of those. Not surprising that it would be an old white man, but hey.
Right. The doctor, of course, just goes with it. He even says a couple of words in Arabic.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably spent significant amount of time there throughout various points in history.
Probably more than the director of this movie has, for sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The director explains to him that this is a rich sheik's tent and this woman is an Arabian princess. And the doctor basically tells her to go put some clothes on. And then he basically, I guess he rolled really well on an investigation check or something, because he just walks right up to the chest that Sarah Kingdom is hiding in and opens it and finds her.
Well, I mean, again, if this is an RPG, you have to open every chest you see.
Yeah. There's a lot of shouting as the doctor collects Sarah basically, and the two of them start heading back to the wardrobe room. But then we get a title card saying, "But what has happened to Stephen?"
I love it.
And the answer to that question is that Stephen ditched the police jacket and reunited with Sarah and the doctor.
Okay. I mean, they wrapped up that loose end about as quickly as they wrap up the cliffhangers.
They all agree to GTFO. The doctor kind of makes a racist comment about Arabians, and they all start heading toward the TARDIS.
Okay.
Yeah. The title cards tell us that, meanwhile, all was not well at the old barn. And the old barn, of course, being the set where the TARDIS is landed. Mm-hmm. The leading actress of that movie is upset because the director liked Sarah and Stephen so much, so she thinks that he doesn't like her anymore.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Incidentally, she's played by Sheila Dunn, who was married to Douglas Camfield, who directed this whole serial.
Huh. Okay. Well, when you first said she's played by, I was like, ooh, what previous character did she play on the show? But all right, that's still interesting. I guess a little factoid there for you.
Well, I think, if I remember right from her TARDIS data core page, that she might play a few future characters.
I'm sure entirely on the merits of her own talent.
Yeah, I'm sure the fact that they're all in serials that Doug directed is unrelated. So the in-story director of this movie that's being filmed manages to calm her down, and they start getting set up for another take when Stephen and Sarah both fail their stealth rolls, and the director spots them heading back to the TARDIS. So he shouts for them to be stopped, and the title cards say, "The chase was on." Again. Stephen and Sarah run through all the various different movie sets, while the doctor just kind of chats with a comedian who's hanging out near the TARDIS. This comedian is upset that he can't really do any good physical comedy gags in his set because Charlie Chaplin has already done all of them. He's been thinking about giving it all up and taking up singing instead, but he's worried that no one will be interested in a singer named Bing Crosby.
I had a feeling it was going to be something like that.
Stephen and Sarah get back to the TARDIS, and the two of them and the Doctor all head inside, and the TARDIS dematerializes. The film studio basically devolves into chaos and confusion as one director marvels at the amazing effect that just happened, and the other director laments the loss of Professor Webster, who's the Arabian expert that he thought the Doctor was. But then the real Professor Webster shows up, and the title card says, "And they lived happily ever after," and we cut back into the TARDIS control room.
Oh, well, that was some wacky shenanigans, Kyle.
Uh-huh. Sarah and Steven are basically wondering, what the fuck was going on there. They don't really realize or understand that it was a 1930s movie studio.
Yeah, do they have movie studios in their times?
Several hundred years in either of their pasts.
Yeah.
The Doctor brings some drinks out on a tray and gives one to Sarah and Stephen, gives one to each of them. And he reminds them that it was Christmas Day at the police station that they were at, before all this nonsense.
Hey, it's Christmas Day somewhere. Enjoy your eggnog.
Well, we so rarely get a chance to celebrate, but this time we must.
Aw, that's sweet of him.
Yeah. He wishes a happy Christmas to the two of them, and they return it. And then the Doctor turns directly to the camera and raises his glass and says,
"Incidentally, Happy Christmas to all of you at home."
Wow, the Doctor knows we're watching. That's cute.
And yeah, as he takes a drink, the words "next episode, volcano" appear on screen.
I was wondering if this would be totally just a filler episode, and yep, it sure was.
Yep. Yeah, and what I read is that was entirely intentional, because they basically figured probably not many people are going to be watching Doctor Who on Christmas Day, and this is back in the era where if you missed it, you just missed it. Mm-hmm. So they intentionally decided to write an episode that had basically nothing to do with the ongoing story. And then I think another part of it was also that the people who are watching on Christmas Day probably don't want to see heavy Dalek shit.
Yeah. So, well, that was cute. I liked the bit at the end where the Doctor wishes us a happy Christmas.
Yeah, that was really fun. And what we saw in the loose cannon reconstruction for that moment was, as far as I could tell, a photograph of a TV screen showing that moment.
Oh, interesting.
So we actually see the Doctor, it's a static image, but we see him looking directly at the camera with his glass raised and everything.
So someone was like, "Wow, the Doctor's wishing me a happy Christmas." Click. He takes a picture. That's cute. I enjoy that. Overall, kind of a throwaway episode, but intentionally so, I guess. So
yeah,
that's interesting.
Fun that it just happened to coincide with our 100th episode.
Yeah, we're celebrating. It's like the Doctor's wishing us a happy 100th episode.
Incidentally, cool. A happy 100th episode to all of you at home.
That's right, listeners. That's the Doctor wishing you a happy 100th Doctor's Watcher. Thanks for sticking with us. Indeed. Hopefully you can stick with us for 762 more. Actually, more than that, because they're still making Doctor Who. Listeners, I don't know if we've got 762 more in us, but we'll see. All right. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to share with the listeners before we move on to recording our second episode for the day?
I don't think so. I think that was it.
All right, cool. Well, we'll say our usual bit. Let's see. Thank you to Circuit 23 for the music he made for us. You can find his album Mens Vermis on Bandcamp. And you can find his other music on SoundCloud, and there's links in the show notes. And you can always email him at circuit.23@gmail.com. Thank you, Kyle, for watching Doctor Who and telling me all about it.
And thank you, Benny, for listening to me talk all about Doctor Who. And also, thank you for doing the first pass edit and the QA listen.
And thank you to all of you for listening to me, listening to Kyle talking about Doctor Who. And thank you, Kyle, for doing the watches of the show, writing up the notes, hosting the show, and doing the, what do we call it? The add sounds and clips edit?
Yeah, something like that. Second edit is...
And the uploading, uploading of the actual show to the actual, internet. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you for writing up the episode descriptions for each of our episodes.
Yeah, when I can think of stuff to put. Listeners, you can always email us at thedoctorswatcher@gmail.com, and you can reach us on Twitter at drwatcher. If you like our show, please share, rate, and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, and tell a friend. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
They passed Charlie Chaplin in the hallway, and then they head through a door.
Like, when you say they passed Charlie Chaplin, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, at first I was like, what is that? No, that was like 30 years before when this was filmed. All right, please go ahead. Here, let me add a different reaction to it. Oh, cool. Charlie Chaplin.